And we're live.
Oh, on that note,
We were just about to have this big heated debate, and I was like, why don't we go live and have the heated debate on the show?
was it heated? I don't know.
No, we weren't.
We're in the realms of forgiveness.
How do I get you to look less tan? I look like a ghost.
You can't.
All right, I'm going to untan Alex for a
You
second.
can't untan me. I'm the tannist. This is such a weird way, even for us, to start a podcast.
I'm just like, it doesn't matter how. Now, see, that at least looks like you look more tan, but it's not like obnoxious, where you're almost like not even English anymore.
You know, Walton's
You have like Middle Eastern.
Walton's tan well.
Yeah, and don't wear sunscreen every day. No, that's not what we're here to talk about. Let's go. What are we here to talk about?
Oh, yeah, we don't want to go down the train wreck of my one great conspiracy theory, which is that sunscreen is bad for you.
Oh, man. That's publicly streamed now.
Well, I don't even care.
What's funny is that'll probably have more hate mail than any of the theological things we say.
Is sunscreen bad?
Yeah. It's like so polarizing.
Yeah, totally is. Yeah. So we are talking about forgiveness, and if you are upset about me not wearing sunscreen, then I ask your forgiveness. Or maybe you should give it anyway. We don't even we don't even know again. So last week I talked about anger, or the week before. We started with anger. We've got like a 3-week series flow processing hard relationships, maybe painful moments, trauma from the past.
Yeah.
Maybe not enough time to process that. I mean, it's going to take a lot more work than 3 weeks.
That's the sense I got is so far, I'm like, oh my goodness, the 3 weeks that Alex planned out for the series feel like genius. Except for I feel like each topic in the 3 are genius in their progression and all those things. But it's almost like you need 6 weeks on topic 1, 6 weeks on topic 2, 6 weeks on topic 3, because the emotional charge is way bigger than 3 weeks can handle.
Yeah, as I put this in, I was like, 3 weeks. I felt like this is going to throw a grenade into the summer. The
lighthearted. You were teasing me about the lighthearted topic of the cross the previous week, and then you go into forgiveness and anger.
Yeah. So I like that we started with anger. I think that if you think about the whole process as a conversation around reconciliation, which is where we'll get to at the end, which is where I would argue we're called as followers of Jesus.
Which is why I think that the way you set up the series is so genius, because it was almost like prerequisites to reconciliation, which is actually the most difficult phase.
It's the most difficult phase, and you specifically can't do reconciliation without forgiveness. And I think,
dealing with anger.
And I think it's hard to do forgiveness without dealing with anger. I think that they become prerequisites.
This is me. I'm just sucking up to you to see if I can heal the wounds that I caused you on Sunday.
We don't even I can't even talk about that yet. I still have a few more days to process. So, I don't even have to make a decision. You gave me a week to figure out forgiveness, and I've only had a few days. So, we'll get there. I was on vacation. I was on vacation giving these pictures sent to me. I was like, wow, how could someone do that to me?
Brutal. If you don't know what you're talking about, I put a photo of Alex up in a Broncos jersey.
Yeah.
And then told him he looked holier in a Broncos jersey.
It still runs deep. So anger began we actually began with getting comfortable with saying what we feel. I love the way Walter Brueggemann talks about imprecatory psalms, and he begins with this idea of something inside of us as Christians might say, I shouldn't feel this way. But what if you feel this way?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think there's been language in churches in sermons I've heard, maybe even sermons I've given over the years, that have skipped the anger step, that have suggested that you can actually get to honest forgiveness without expressing those deep emotions. Now maybe sometimes you can. Maybe some people get there. But I think you at least need to throw out the option and use the language given to us in the scriptures, which is really like, no, say what you feel. Like, God can handle what you feel.
And then eventually give it to him.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So without that, if you don't go through the process of plumbing the depths of your own emotional pain, then if you offer forgiveness, it's not even forgiveness of the entire personal problem. Mm-hmm. It's actually a secret, throwing it under the rug and pretending like it's not there, which never goes well for anyone. So until you go through that first phase and really grapple with the gravity of your own pain, then your forgiveness is only partial. Yeah. At best. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I think it even step one takes courage, because the moment you hand over responsibility for justice to someone else, you've really lost control. Now, the level to which you actually have control, we could get into that. But you're entering into this process of saying, God, instead of me deciding what happens to them and perhaps even acting on it, I'm going to allow you to decide. There's something beautiful about the element of control. I think we'll get to this again this week when we talk about reconciliation. But it reminds me of the movie version of a book we both enjoy, and I've read many times. You've certainly read one or two times, which is The Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes, once.
A story about forgiveness that has become, over a couple of centuries, actually one of the go-to stories for revenge, for how you process anger. It was actually written at the same time as Les Miserables.
Yeah.
Which is actually a story of forgiveness. One's
more about revenge, the other one's more about forgiveness.
Yeah. And in one of the film versions, there's this moment where something like we're talking about here is offered. And Edmond Dantes says to Mercedes, the fiancée that he lost all those years ago, if you ever loved me, don't rob me of my hate. It's all I have. He expresses this sense of like, this is the thing I'm hanging on to. This is the thing that's keeping me sane, being able to have this feeling of hate and he's towards those that have hurt me.
And what's wild is he's like wildly successful, financially, wildly influential.
Yeah.
And the engine inside of all that success is hate.
Yeah. That's how he's.
It's a highly productive engine in the soul.
Yeah. And so I think when I talked about anger a couple of years ago, I shared a story that came back to my mind, which was I found out a piece of information. The context doesn't necessarily matter. It was connected to just some kind of work thing. And it hit me. It came to me on a Sunday, and then that Sunday evening, I was driving students down to Tennessee from Michigan. We used to do this senior sneak trip where we'd meet at the church at midnight, and we'd just drive. And usually I would nap for a little while on Sunday afternoon into early evening. I'd get some stuff together. I'd go meet them at the church, and we'd go, so I could do most of the driving. Yeah. And I'd found this thing out on Sunday morning. I'd had it lurking with me on Sunday afternoon. And then on Sunday night, driving down to Tennessee, I just spent like 8 hours with my hands gripping the wheel, like almost twisting the steering wheel to bits, just imagining all the things I was going to say, all the ways that I was going to let loose my anger on this situation.
Yeah.
Just allowing it to begin to tear my soul apart.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it's like it's toxicity, but it's also it's joy. It's like sense of like, That's
if I say it this way, it's going to be so satisfying.
Oh, it's going to feel so good. And that's the thing that you lose when you give up anger. When you hand the justice to God. The step you talked about this week is a step beyond that.
Yeah.
Because then in forgiveness, it's more than just not getting even, right? It's
actually starting to turn the corner to where I'm no longer angry, but I actually have this almost longing that not only that I would forgive them, but that even God would forgive them.
Yeah. I wondered if the language is something like in anger, and how we talked about anger, we're really saying something like, I'm angry and you should be too, to God. And then in forgiveness, we're almost saying like, I'm going to forgive them and you should too.
Yeah.
Like there's almost some switch towards. Now, we talked about this briefly the other day. At this point, they don't need to know anything's going on. Like just you.
Phase 1. Yeah. They don't even, phase 1 and 2, they may not have a clue that you're ruminating or anything.
Yeah.
They might, but they might not. It's actually this coming week where Alex will solve all of the problems. So please come I'm excited because it's this coming week, reconciliation out of all of the weeks feels the most daunting.
Yes. I said that Jessica and I were just talking about this just now. I said, I feel like it's the big ask. It's
and it's got risk involved. It's like reconciliation can be dangerous.
Yeah. And I've processed all of the elements of that, and I'm still not sure what to say about it. Part of what a lot of people don't know is I changed a huge chunk of my message on Sunday morning, and partly because I realized that some of the things I was saying was going to start building to the things that you were going to probably need to say this coming week. And it was so terrifying to me that I had to add a bunch of slides to caveat some stuff, and hopefully diffuse more of it into your week rather than mine. I love it. That's brilliant. Absolutely. As you should. I finished my outline this morning and sent it off to be printed for our Sunday morning
handout
notes,
thing.
Handouts. And I'm still not sure I can say any of it. So that's where we are on Thursday morning.
Just this lighthearted summer series.
So we've got some questions to get to, but
we do.
So I dropped off with anger. You have some choices. Your choice 1 is to get even. Choice 2 is to stuff it deep inside. This is all assuming you've taken Jesus seriously when he says, "Do not be angry." So you're trying to deal with anger in some ways rather than just keeping on being angry.
Yeah.
You're going to get even. You're going to pretend you're not angry, both of which have their downsides, as we saw. Yeah,
which we talked about when I was summing it up. Is like, I've tried that. Doesn't work. It just leaks out on everyone. Now everyone's damaged, even the people that don't get harmed. Yeah,
absolutely. And then the third option is to give it to God. Where did you pick up from there? Now you've got to remember, while planning for this week.
So the passage I was assigned, I think, in hindsight, I didn't ever, like when you assign the passage and I open it up, it's pretty short. Mm-hmm. And really, even the larger, there's like three verses or something. The larger context is not even the main point of it. It's just this cry of Jesus on the cross, mm-hmm. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. And I've never read it in the context of how you assigned it to me in a forgiveness series. And it was just like, it hit me like a ton of bricks at what Jesus was doing and what he was actually forgiving. Mm-hmm. And then as I started studying it more, starting to realize that Luke has a consistent pattern of appealing to ignorance when he talks about sin. And that in the book of Luke and in the book of Acts, and that Jesus then on the cross appeals to ignorance in the context of forgiveness, and then Stephen, as he's getting martyred, says almost the exact same line Jesus says, and appeals to this ignorance kind of concept.
This line of Jesus is only in Luke.
Yeah, and then when Peter in the book of Acts is retelling the story, he says, I know you guys were ignorant and your leadership was ignorant. Yeah. And so then I felt like then I was like, so how does Jesus get the gall to pray this outlandish prayer in the midst of being stabbed in the back by friends, which we talked about in the sermon? Like I went through and tried to help people understand the personal crimes that had been committed to Jesus prior to him saying this just seemingly ludicrous thing. And what he does is he has this ability to look past his own personal pain and suffering and the wounds that have been done to him and see the foolishness and the brokenness of the ones who've wounded him, which then is like a seed that allows him to then say, you know what? They have no idea. Mm-hmm. They have no idea what the pain is.
So this is the beautiful perspective Jesus brings. What we're going to talk when we start John about. Yeah, the opening of John. You know, Jesus is the logos, the word, the reason, the behind the world,
the logic. Yeah,
he was with God. He was God, and so he has this perspective of, oh, this isn't what they were made for. This is how they were made, and this isn't who they really are, which we don't have. We're relying on his perspective because we oftentimes, when people have brought trauma to us, have only seen and can only know them for what they are. So Jesus, when he prays, has this sense of like, no, this isn't who they really are. We're having to trust him, I think, a little bit on.
Yeah, and actually that's a lot of what happened on Sunday morning is I realized that Jesus's statement on the cross is the justification for you forgiving someone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, because if you've been harmed, you don't even know how bad it is.
Yeah.
And that even as I say that, you might be listening to this episode thinking, yeah, I do. I've lived with this pain for 40 years of so-and-so did this or said that, or they harmed me or they abused me or whatever. And I know how bad it is. But do you really? Like, it is so bad that it's wounded you for all those years and you know of your experience of the pain, but then you don't know necessarily consciously the subconscious pain that you've experienced, where someone who looks like the person that harmed you, they trigger you subconsciously and you just have an angst towards them, or they have similar personality traits and you just can't get along with them. Like, psychological, emotional, and physical pain are so big that you can only acknowledge your personal experience of it, their conscious experience of pain. But even you're not fully aware of how bad it is, what they did to you.
Well, as well.
And they aren't, because even if they were trying to damage you, they may not have a clue that you're still harmed 40 years later. And even if that's what their goal was, they may not realize that then the pain you cause them is causing you to show up differently for your kids and for your spouse and for your community. And so, in other words, that passing comments that your dad or mom said of like, man, when are you going to ever start being fit again and stuff? And you're like wounded and you feel not beautiful or whatever it may be. And then that's haunted you for your whole life. And then you said something similar to your kid. So that person's harm has now spilled into multiple generations. As fleeting as a comment about your weight might be, they have no idea how heavy this is. And then, so the reason forgiveness is possible is still because of the cross, and that like you just said, Jesus has this ability to zoom out all the way, see what every single human coulda, shoulda, woulda been if it wasn't for the brokenness, if it wasn't for the systems and powers and principalities at play, if it wasn't for all that, he sees what could have been and knows all the pain of generational things that led to them harming you and Jesus.
In emotionally healthy spirituality.
Yeah.
Actually, emotionally healthy relationships, I think it is. Maybe they don't do it in the spirituality one, which plug. We're starting emotionally healthy spirituality in the fall. Just going to be just a gift, I think, to the church. But they do a lot of work around genograms.
They do that in this
they do.
one.
Yeah. So you're really like tracking back into like, what do I see in my parents? What about my grandparents? What about my great grandparents? And where do like lines converge?
Yeah.
Addictive personalities pass from one generation to the next. Like the cost of addiction runs into the next generation. The cost of anger, of brokenness, of crimes, of all these things seem to run and don't just disappear without our processing them.
Yeah. And I could tell even a personal story about that I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Just I've noticed that when I get grumpy, I'll notice that I'm grumpy.
Yeah.
I might even tell my family, I'm sorry, I'm really tired and grumpy today. But it wasn't until this year that I was able to look under the hood a little bit further. And if I've got any sort of like, if a big bill hits the mail, I've noticed that a lot of my grumpiness, not all of it, is when I'm feeling slightly tense about finances.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look a little bit further under the hood and you realize, and everyone's story is different, but for me, maybe it's partially, I grew up as a missionary kid with very little, and our entire well-being was based upon the donations of people. I had hand-me-downs, everything, and so I had this low grade, even from my very infancy, this low grade anxiety about provision and care and all of this stuff. So I could just say, try not to be grumpy. Or I can go deeper back into my past, and or maybe even my parents and their relationship with money and their past, and realize and start to learn and undo some of the fear, because it's not fair to my family. So I'm actually seeing a counselor that's just helping me process what's the fear that rises up into you that causes you to be really short with your kids about cleaning their rooms. Not related to their rooms, but it's actually because you got that big medical bill that showed up yesterday. Mm-hmm. How weird are humans that we're that damaged by the world and the systems and the structures? So that's the genogram idea, is that like there's generational brokenness that leads to humans showing up in healthy ways and unhealthy ways. And the only way to deal with the final behavior is actually to go backwards. Mm-hmm. And so what Jesus does on the cross is he's able to see through all of the pain, his own personal stuff, and eventually get to the place where he's like, Father, forgive them, for they have no idea the gravity of what they're doing to me. Yes. And they don't have any idea the engine of brokenness that's behind them that's causing them to do said thing. But they don't know either.
Yeah.
And so I had this progression, I had this one slide that sort of shows the progression of what a journey of this stage of the forgiveness part might look like. So it starts with centering in our pain. That includes week 1 of your sermon series too. And then eventually it starts to see through Jesus's eyes, not even our eyes, because we can't ever know the layers.
Yep.
But we start to see that Jesus at least knows the layers. We see through and then once we've gotten through that journey, we might just maybe be able to stomach and have this thing that swells up in us and join Jesus in his mercy.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the progression.
So one of the interesting things to me, and this nudges towards, I think, some of the questions that you said you got. I think there's there's a way scripture, the Gospels, especially when it comes to crucifixion, are very, they're very unimaginative. They're very just direct. Jesus said this. Jesus was crucified.
Yeah.
Jesus was beaten. It's very matter of fact. And so, some of that's around like sensibilities around how you talked about that kind of thing. And, the horror of the cross as a curse from a Jewish perspective, hanging on a tree.
Yeah.
As dishonoring, as the shame on display. Like we have got pictures of it that tend to reduce it down a little bit. But it was a mixture of pain and shame and intensified suffering.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson's version of the Passion of the Christ, which
tries to break some of that,
which I think goes over the top with some of it in some ways. But I remember this scene in that version distinctly. And Mel Gibson as a director does a couple of interesting things, like in that scene. One, he's the one that swings the hammer. When you see the hammer landing on the nails, that's his hand in the shot. You don't see him, you just see his hand, because he wanted to acknowledge his personal responsibility.
His own culpability.
Like he's involved in that. As we all are.
Yeah.
Like we're all like responsible for or the reason that Jesus takes that step. And he has Jesus say those lines as the nails are being hammered into his wrists. And so it's broken up with like gasps and with like the sense that the cries of pain. It's not just a simple
Father, forgive them, for they have no idea.
It's not. It's a human being saying those words in the midst of intense pain. So I think sometimes we're able to reduce Jesus' forgiveness down to, well, of course he could do that.
But then you fast forward to Stephen.
Yeah. But even for Jesus in that moment, before we even get to Stephen, I think there's the extreme pain that's been inflicted on you in that moment while still choosing a pathway of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I think so much of that comes down to our struggle, if we're honest. All of us struggle to hold well Jesus' humanity and his divinity.
Yeah.
We tend to go one way or the other. And so if in our mind we start to move towards, well, yeah, that was easy for him. Well, that's actually not what being human is. I think he does a really good job of exemplifying the cost of saying that.
Yeah. And
the decision of saying it in the midst of pain. And Stephen then replicates that.
Yeah.
And does it in the same way. Forgiveness is hard. And I don't know if you touched on this, and I also feel like I think that Scripture is somewhat comfortable with the selfish nature of forgiveness. I think it's a little comfortable with you forgiving for you as much as the other person.
Which brings us to the question from the last week.
Yeah.
That actually a question that came in for your first week's sermon. Just by way of summary, we did our best without you to engage it last episode. Mm-hmm. But the question, so I'll do my best to summarize. This was like really well written question that was almost a page long, that it addressed multiple rebuttals and all of these different things. But someone wrote in this question that is, when you boil it down, cited a theology professor who wrote a book called Unpacking Forgiveness, I believe is what it was, who makes the case in the book that you shouldn't forgive.
Unless you're asked.
And that if you do, it's immoral in some way, shape, or form. There's a bunch of caveats in the question in and of itself, and I'm assuming in the book itself also there's even more. And what we said on last week's episode, that I felt like maybe they were conflating forgiveness and reconciliation a little bit. And that was how we addressed it. But you're starting to touch on some of the similar stuff at the end of the question, unfortunately I checked it off, so it'd take me a second to find it. At the end of the question, it sort of says that it's not real forgiveness if it doesn't lead towards reconciliation. And so the self-help, make myself feel better about myself kind of forgiveness isn't real biblical forgiveness, is what part of this book was saying. And you're actually saying that the Bible seems to hint at quite the opposite, that it's quite comfortable with the self, the freedom that is forgiveness.
So my reason for thinking that is one specific passage. It was one I nearly assigned, but I had it in the back of my mind wanting to do a parable series at some point, and it's a parable. So, and the parable is the unforgiving servant. And in that story Jesus tells, and again, Jesus tells these provocative stories. He throws them up there and you have to do the deep work. But he imagines a servant that we generally take to mean, a human being, and this servant has a master that we tend to take to be God.
Yeah. And
has a huge debt and goes to the master, and the master says, I forgive it.
Yeah, I almost jumped to that text this week. No, it's interesting.
I know.
It's a great passage for the topic. Yep.
And so the servant goes away free, forgiven, and then encounters someone who owes him a debt and demands the payment in full, and refuses forgiveness.
Yep.
The language is set around bookkeeping. Like, it doesn't use precisely those terms that we would use today, but to a first century person, they would understand, like opening the books.
Yeah.
It seems like the result of the parable is this. This is the ending that I've come to as a conclusion for it when I've used it before. You are either a person who plays by the bookkeeping system, or you're not. And you're the one that chooses. If you want to keep books, well, God is going to keep books. And if you are happy to surrender the bookkeeping, then God's happy to surrender it too. So that's what I mean when
Which also ties into the end of the Lord's Prayer text.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I start to feel that actually Scripture is okay with a pragmatic sense of I choose forgiveness because I want forgiveness shown to me. Not in an earning sense, but in a that came first.
Yeah.
It takes seriously what Jesus says about forgive as you have been forgiven. It takes seriously Jesus' parables. Now again, like that doesn't even get to all the emotional processing that has to come there.
Yeah.
But I do feel like at least on the surface, Scripture recognizes that maybe choosing forgiveness is a pragmatic measure as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's some interesting, they're probably way too long for this conversation, some theological hair splitting that we could do around some of that. But
yeah, and what I would say in that story is both people ask for forgiveness. So maybe that's the caveat. Like the first servant goes to the master and says, he actually doesn't ask for forgiveness, does he? He actually asks, give me time to repay the debt.
Yeah, I'll pay it all back.
But he does at least show an inclination to restore the relationship, as does the other servant in the follow-up conversation. So there is at least a recognition of debt.
Yeah. So here's the interesting piece of that does the theological hair splitting conversation that starts, which again, I don't know if we have time for, and to hit this other question.
How can we not have time for theological hair splitting on a theology
man.
podcast?
Well, we just have another question that's a doozy. Is the idea that that hints at that forgiveness could sound like don't worry about it.
Yeah, totally.
Not an actual justice will be done. Mm-hmm. And I said pretty unequivocally on Sunday, part of the reason why Jesus can also get away with saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing, is that in the cross in and of itself, justice is served against all of the evil in the destruction of the world. And so justice will be done. And I said part of the reason we can forgive is because we know that there will be no injustice when all of the books are like, the cross actually has a way of dealing with injustice fully and finally without just sweeping it under the rug and saying, don't worry about it anymore.
Yes, again,
and so that's where it gets theologically hair splitting, because you start to get into theories of atonement. Yeah. You start to have to like say, well, what happens at the cross? And like, is it justice, or is it God saying, yeah, don't worry about it anymore?
And if you're still at a point where you want to actively see that justice outwork upon the person themselves,
well, and not just at the cross.
Yeah.
But either way, the question is, does the cross actually execute justice against the person that harmed you?
Yes.
Even if they end up in heaven, quote unquote,
and as it does for us in the way that we deserve justice.
And so I think that's the hair splitting part that leads us into a whole conversation about multiple theories of atonement, the various models, how some of them are heavier on justice. Some of them feel like the cross is almost unnecessary because it's just a means to get to resurrection. On and on and on it goes.
Yeah.
Now that we've thrown that bombshell into the conversation and then not addressing it, I don't know. But yeah.
Just another piece of evidence that we don't actually know what we're doing.
Could never even plumb the depths of some of these things on a show like this.
Yeah.
But,
so
yeah,
we have another question.
We do.
You ready for it?
I more or less.
Okay. You want to read it?
Sure.
Your laptop.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I noticed is some of the things I said on Sunday were really hard to hear for some folks who have been harmed and are continually being harmed in some way, shape, or form. And it was a lot of it was centered around this idea of appealing to ignorance as a justification for forgiveness. Hey guys, I have a question about Aaron's sermon on anger and forgiveness from this week. How do you forgive someone such as a family member who continues to be cruel, bully, and manipulate? In other words, those whose hurtful actions are not only in the past but ongoing. I love the idea of seeing beyond our wounds to seeing the person, but how can one continue to be in relation with another person who persists in this way? Perhaps this question is about the relationship of boundaries and more than forgiveness. Aaron spoke about how a person's causing harm does not know what they're doing. And at the end of the message, he acknowledged that there are people who do know what they're doing, but then also stood by his statement and said they still don't know what they're doing. I'm paraphrasing. I'm having a hard time with that idea specifically, which I've heard from a couple different people. Some of them felt like there was a freedom in that idea, and some of them felt like, I don't even know if I can believe you.
Yeah.
And I get that. There are definitely people who know what they are doing and absolutely know the ripple effects that they are of the harm that they will cause and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Can you guys say more? How can forgiveness of such a person ever be more than condoning their actions? One last question. If God is concerned with justice, then what does justice look like for more run-of-the-mill person causing harm? Aaron spoke about these huge, like, nation-state crimes and all this stuff. So there's a couple questions in here. Let's see if I can narrow it down to...
Those are good questions. It's some good processing.
Very good questions. Yeah. And I've had multiple conversations very much in the same line. So I'll maybe work backwards. What about the light ones? I had a conversation on Monday with someone who said, well, what about like really stupid little harms? Like, you look fat in that dress.
Yeah.
This was this sort of hypothetical scenario that I had a conversation about. And does that really require justice? Can't you just be like, oh, don't like they come to you, they say, I'm really sorry. And you say, don't worry about it. And my statement, my theory on that is, and I don't know if this is fully true, or I don't know, I'd have to do more thinking on it, but I think that even that statement does more harm than what you're forgiving them for. Psychologically, subconsciously, and emotionally. If you think you're not beautiful and then someone else says something about your appearance, or someone looks at you funny, you go back to that statement. You already forgave the person. You two are reconciled. You're good as happy as clams, whatever, moving on in relationship. And yet the thing they said to you in a moment of stupidity, or let it slide or whatever through their lips, it's still shaping the way you see yourself, the way you see other people look at you. And so you're not even forgiving all of their crime.
Whoever came up with the phrase "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me" was a moron.
Total moron.
I mean,
words might be like sticks and stones can break bones, but like words can like wreck worlds.
Yeah.
And generational worlds.
Yeah,
so even the most like stupid, ignorant. I almost told a story on Sunday about my relationship with my daughter, and how I just put my foot in my mouth, and I had no idea that I caused the harm. Yeah. So, a brief version of that is that she took her freshman year of high school off of choir, and the school had a policy that if you wanted to be an advanced placement choir, you had to. No freshman gets into it. You have to do the first level choir before you're allowed to do second level choir. She did first semester, she skipped it, and then she regretted it. And then she had to go through the crucible of going through low level choir before she could get to the higher choir. And so then she was one of the few sophomore in the low level choir. And so I went to her concert, and she'd been talking all semester long about like, it's not a very good choir. It's not a very good choir, not a very good choir. And like, she's joking about it constantly with me. I went to her first choir concert, and I was like, oh, I loved this song. I love this song. I talked a bunch about the advanced placement choir. And then I said, oh, I love the song you guys did this way, some positive comments. And then I said, oh, there was that one person in your choir that was like singing at the top of their lungs, almost like not trying to blend at all. And I kind of chuckled about it. Now, she'd been teasing her choir all semester. That comment about she was a part of something that was less from her professional musician dad wrecked her. Oh. And she was so hurt that she had no control of the thing I critiqued, and she was so hurt. And I didn't know. She didn't tell me. It wasn't until later that my wife told me how hurtful it was, when I was like, oh my goodness. And so back to your talk about ignorant harm. Yeah. It still was a huge problem. It damaged her relationship with her dad, and I didn't even know about it. Yeah.
When I used to teach students, when I was a youth pastor, on the power of words and things that you said, I did this illustration where I would have one of them come up, and they'd have a sledgehammer and like a big clay pot that I'd bought from like Home Depot or something. And they were just allowed to just like hammer the pot as hard as they could. Just give it one just great like shot, and this thing would just shatter into pieces. And then I'd say to them, okay, now you have 10 seconds to put it back together. And they'd scramble around for like their 10 seconds, just desperately trying to collect as many pieces as they could. And of course, didn't get close to it couldn't. I mean, it was just decimated.
Couldn't even collect all the pieces, yeah.
And it was just to them an illustration of like the one thing, the one moment can actually take a lifetime to pull back together.
Yeah, even just a slip of the tongue.
Yeah.
Me trying to like join my daughter in sort of fun bantering conversation turned into a deep wound.
Yeah. So I think that that's actually where Jesus goes in that Matthew 5 passage. The words it's really interesting, like the things that he talks about being angry, he talks about using a word like raka, like stupid, and then another word that's like more moral, like you're morally like unacceptable. Yeah. there's not, most of the scholarship on it would say there's not really a graduation on the words. Although they're all treated pretty much the same, but there is a graduation on the punishments. And he's actually, it seems Jesus is trying to say, and any of these could be the result of the contempt behind those words.
Yeah.
That kind of judgment. So I think, yes, to say, I would never want to diminish the things that are said. I think that the emotion or response is totally justified.
Yeah, so I think the justice thing for even run-of-the-mill harms.
Jesus suggests it could be extreme.
Well, I think Jesus does, and I think that it is still a matter of justice.
Yeah.
It's not something you can just say, oh, you know what? I know you didn't mean to, which is what my daughter did. I went to her. I said, you know what? I'm sorry. She said, you know what, Dad, I know you love me. And I know that's why I didn't tell you, is like, I know you didn't mean to, and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, great. But I was devastated that I'd even accidentally done it. So even though I had the forgiveness thing, it's still big, even the run of the mill stuff. So that's the end question. The first question was a little bit more about this ongoing. How do you forgive and still remain in relationship with someone who's ongoingly causing harm? And I think you should come this coming Sunday to talk about reconciliation, not forgiveness. Because I think that that's actually where the rubber meets the road, is you're asking more, how do I stay in relationship with an ongoing perpetrator of harm? That's a little bit more of a reconciliation issue than just a forgiveness issue. Now, forgiveness is always a part of reconciliation, but reconciliation isn't always a part of forgiveness.
I think yes, I agree. I think one of the things we'll wrestle with on Sunday is whether reconciliation is possible when one side can't admit the wrong done.
Yeah.
You know, actually, one of the interesting stories I was reading this week was in South Africa, with some of the reconciliation process there after 1994.
Yeah.
And
don't give too much away.
Yeah. Well, I'm teasing.
By the way, we're like in a war zone for you. There's like wasps flying over our heads nonstop.
We're just playing with danger.
Yeah, sorry.
So one of the things that was required for reconciliation was public confession.
Yeah.
So you could be forgiven for the most heinous crimes.
Yeah. And you didn't even have to feel remorse. No, you just had to say what you did.
What you'd done.
One of the most controversial parts of that whole thing, right?
Yeah. But it had to be public. The victims were invited, and it was recorded and televised nationally. And if you didn't confess and were found out later, well then...
no forgiveness.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating, like that for some people has been like a requirement. Again, goes back to the tension between, do you have to forgive if the other person doesn't ask? The conversation there... is
it even moral? Yeah, all that stuff.
The conversation there that really I think is a theological conundrum is, if we're expected to forgive without the other person asking, does God expect something of us that he doesn't expect of himself? If God's forgiveness requires repentance, confession, which is
asking, where go back to last week's question. That's exactly what this theologian says.
Does it require? Is he now saying to us, do something I don't do? Again,
literally that exact line was in the question. So, and I still think that's conflating reconciliation and forgiveness.
Potentially, yeah.
Because clearly, because of the text I preached Sunday, Jesus has some measure of forgiveness that doesn't have quote unquote salvific power. The forgiveness Jesus offers on the cross doesn't mean necessarily like universal restoration of human relationship with God. He just says,
as does Stephen, and Stephen's doesn't either.
No,
but they
forgive anyway.
Yeah,
which means there is a kind of forgiveness that not only doesn't justify the harm and doesn't have any relationship restoring power other than
Agreed.
I'm willing to.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgive them. You should do.
So like I said, it still goes back to a more of a conversation around reconciliation. So maybe salvation, as we classically think of it, salvation is actually when restoration, or in the Greek concept of justification, or when that happens is when there's restoration, when there's admission of brokenness, admission of finitude, admission of fault, and then mixed with the forgiveness that was already extended by Jesus at the cross. So that's my best attempt at that first part of the question. I think that if you're in an ongoing relationship with someone who is actively harming, detrimental, painful, there's other things going on, but what you're asking is actually more, how can I be in continual relationship, which demands reconciliation stuff?
I would say if you are in a toxic relationship like that, I also am comfortable with saying sometimes the line is drawn and you say, until you're willing to do ... then I'm breaking off contact.
Absolutely.
I think that...
And that can still be from a place of forgiveness.
Totally. Yeah. I think I'm always intrigued by our sense of obligation to keep the channel open and make forgiveness harder than our willingness to break off the communication with the potential that forgiveness is easier. And I understand why.
Yeah.
We want relationships to continue. We want to be hopeful people, their family members in this question. Like we want to stay connected to people with the hope that the thing could turn around. But in actual fact, when we do that, we make forgiveness a much more difficult thing. Again,
like forgiveness is a prerequisite to everything being awesome.
Yeah.
Like that's actually reconciliation. And what you're saying is actually maybe you remove yourself and your family from the situation and forgive them.
But again,
but don't talk to them until other things
are complex. Like what if it's a parent who's sick? What if it's someone who's distant to you?
Or a child who's dependent on you or whatever.
Dependent on you physically. We're doing the best we can to cover every situation. But I think my big encouragement would actually be to make it a continual matter of prayer. And actually to begin with the anger element. And then in forgiveness, to be comfortable saying to God, right now I don't want to forgive. And I don't even know how to forgive. But I am willing to ask you to help me move to forgiveness. One of the things that we forget in this is that we're not doing this by ourselves.
Yeah.
We're doing this in companionship with God. Yeah, Stephen can only do what he does because he has this moment where he looks up and he sees the Father waiting for him.
Yeah.
He's in the midst of a relationship with God that's so close that the physical experience feels distant to him in comparison to that spiritual relationship. So I think if you're trying to process forgiveness and that hasn't been a conversation between you and God, and I don't know from the question, it could be a regular conversation, but make it one and recognize that might take time. Like that God isn't in a rush, and there's a huge difference between actively pursuing the possibility of forgiveness with God in prayer and simply refusing it.
Yeah. And so like there's this weird tension about being a follower of Jesus that I think you're trying to like articulate, which is that for sort of like pastorally, and I think Jesus would say like potentially, depending on the situation, if you are in danger, get out. Protect yourself, protect your kids, protect your family.
The person might have to go to jail.
They might have to go to jail. Like Jesus forgives David and his entire family is wrecked forever.
Yeah.
Like forgiveness does not mean there aren't ramifications.
Yep.
Ramifications can even be massive. Jail, never talk to the person again, and still forgiveness is still possible in spite of all of those ramifications. So please hear us there. There are some scenarios where because of the work of God in your heart, I think that the Spirit can invite someone to stay in certain levels of heavy relationship, and empower them by his Spirit to have a similar heart that he has. Like Jesus is getting killed and he stays in relationship. He pursues relationship with his murderers. And then we see examples of some saints, because of the work of Spirit in their life, actually going to places where their physical selves are in potentially going to be harmed. And by God's grace, they find it in themselves to say, you know what, I sign up to demonstrate the love of God, even at the risk of my own self. I don't think you should make that decision lightly. In fact, I don't even know if you should make that decision to stay in a harmful relationship without some serious counsel and wisdom from a counselor or even a law official. I don't know what it is, but maybe, just maybe, they're like, who knows? Like, I can't make that. I think that's to Alex's point. You have to do this in relationship with Jesus, but I don't think Jesus would condemn you for leaving. And if he invites you into it, maybe there's some sort of measure of intensity that he's inviting you to struggle through in order to demonstrate the love of God.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I don't even know if I like what I just said.
Yeah, I get that. I get the tension because you know, our goal is for people to be safe, protected. It's one of the questions I've always wrestled with, like the tension between my wanting everyone to be safe and Jesus wanting them to be alive, and that isn't always the same thing. I'm going to say one thing that's another teaser for Sunday.
Sunday's going to be good.
Yeah. My suspicion is forgiveness and reconciliation are always unfair, but they don't have to be unwise. Like
between humans?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's always unfair. I think you're giving up.
Oh man, we're already almost at an hour. You can't be saying statements like that. I want to ask questions. I have so many questions.
So I think
next week.
I think grace is categorically unfair, and forgiveness is grace,
depending on what atonement is.
No, I still think it's unfair. In terms of the interpersonal relationship, it's unfair. It's being willing to bring in a third party that theoretically could make it fair.
That's what I mean. I feel that's why I said at the end of my message that apart from the cross, forgiveness may be unwise, even immoral. And then I paused there and I said, without Jesus, I do not recommend forgiveness. Maybe. And I left it there. And I don't even know how I feel about that. But through the cross, it's possible because justice and mercy meet. So anyway,
I still think it's unfair.
I mean, I think it's unfair.
So let me.
If justice is actually fully served, and in eternity, we all look back on all of the pain, and we're like, Jesus dealt with it all,
which you don't see in this. Like I think the reason I say it like that isn't really about whether it's, in the end, unfair on a cosmic level or on an interpersonal level. I really say on a pastoral level of, if you're going into forgiveness hoping one day forgiving feels fair, it will never feel fair.
Agreed.
You know, it will never feel like this is equal. We can call it quits. That's what we see on an interpersonal level and a macro level. Nations never feel fair. Like, you still can't go to Ireland and talk about the relationship between monarchy and republic, the relationship between North and South, the relationship between Catholicism and Protestantism, and have it feel fair. You still can't go to Rwanda and have it feel fair. You still can't go to South Africa and have it feel fair. You still can't talk about civil rights and have it feel fair. In the end, it always feels like someone at some point is saying, I'm choosing for this not to feel fair.
Yes, I do think that there is, like, it's from an emotional standpoint that every act of genuine forgiveness is deciding to absorb wrong upon yourself.
Yeah.
Now, in the, like, again, very metaphysical, theoretical level of, like, theology, I do think that maybe there's, like, at least I hope so, because this is kind of what I preach on Sunday. There is a place where you're saying part of the reason I can let go of justice is because I think that Jesus will ultimately weigh the scales correctly and make all things right.
Yes.
Which is actually the definition of that word in Greek, the justification language around salvation. It's more about him setting the world aright, weighing all the scales, all of the players, and at the end, all the chips fall, and he's, like, dealt with it. That's what some of the things happen.
My pushback is a little bit, as I feel some of the teaching is like, and the chips never fall.
Even in eternity.
Well, I think that's what it is to not live by the books.
Not live by the books.
I mean, that's
I know, which is why I called it out when you said that. I think that the hint I was making of this in my message was that Jesus does still live by the books, and he absorbs all of the debt upon himself. Therefore, books cleared.
Yes. Yeah. No. I can
see what I'm saying. So this is where atonement theory becomes such a more, like, emotionally charged issue. Like, let's talk about atonement theories. It feels like, who cares? Until you get into the very weeds and the splitting of hairs, you're like, no, this actually really, really matters.
Yeah.
Does Jesus ever sweep any harm under the rug and say, don't worry about it? Or does he actually pay properly for every wound that's ever been done in human history? And I tend to think, with a list of different theories of atonement, I think he pays for it all ultimately, and that we will look back in history past and say, I am fully 100% satisfied with how Jesus dealt with the way I was harmed, and with how Jesus dealt with how I harmed others.
Man, we got to pick up that argument next week.
We didn't even get to the rest of the question.
Oh, we didn't? Well, we should do that.
Real quick, I think we did, but we didn't do it in the context of the question. The third question in this was about the whole ignorance thing. What they do know. Yeah. They did know. The statement is, Aaron spoke about this thing. Message, he acknowledged that there are people who do not know what they're doing, but they also don't know what they're doing. I'm paraphrasing. I'm having a hard time with this. There's definitely people who know what they're doing and absolutely know the ripple effects. They like they're trying to do generational harm, I guess, maybe. And they enjoy it. Can you guys say more? How can forgiveness of such a person ever not be condoning them? And I think what I was saying before is and after I put up the slide I put up on Sunday said this. It said, what if they do know? Where did I put the slide? What if they do know and they were just trying to be mean? What if they're just cruel? And I said, I still don't think they know. All of it. Even if they're trying to create generational scene. And I said it this way on Sunday, like, even if they stayed up for 6 months creatively designing the way to harm you and then executed the plan to the T, they can't know how bad your pain is. They can't know, they can't experience your pain the way you experience it. And I don't think that what I'm doing is lessening what they did. I'm saying what they did is worse than they think. even if they're trying to be bad, what they did is your pain is far higher than what they tried to cause you. Mm-hmm. And the thing you're forgiving them of is bigger and more painful to you than even they intended to create. So they don't know that part, and they don't know the weird mishmash of destruction that is their own depravity that's causing them to want to cause you that mm-hmm. pain. That's what I mean, is like one human harming another human is never an isolated system. It's mm-hmm. always bigger and more generational, generation past, generation future stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't think that diminishes it at all. In fact, it's way worse.
Well, I'm trying to remember, did you talk about this from the context of the passage is, to me, interesting in answering this question. Like the soldiers that Jesus says they don't know what they do. Well, they did. I mean, they absolutely knew they were swinging a hammer. They absolutely knew.
Yep, and I said that on Sunday, yeah.
They were crucifying someone.
And then the religious leaders that led to this death, they know that they know that they're trying to get rid of this religiously toxic, in their opinion, personality. They're trying to protect God's reputation, God's fame, their power.
But at the same time, they
have no idea they're murdering the creator of the universe.
They don't know the depth of it.
They don't know the ripple effects that led to their fear. Yeah. They don't know the ignorance of how they read the scriptures that didn't help them understand that this was mm-hmm. the creator of the universe. They don't know actually in Jesus' context, not in any of ours, but they don't know that this is going to lead to their potential salvation.
Yeah.
Like, there is no human harm committed to another human that could possibly be conscious of all of the ramifications of it.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by they are ignorance.
So to get into the specific of the question, I don't know that to forgive them, you have to let them know that.
No.
So I don't know you have to give them that sense of this is okay.
And I don't think we could ever, which is why I'm saying forgiveness. I was actually calling back to your sermon the previous week. It's like, you're not even creative enough to come up with a proper punishment.
Yeah.
Like, you're the scenario you just told, one daughter fighting with the other daughter, and they come tell you all the things they want to do to their sibling to cause them pain, to justify whatever it is. They aren't capable of coming up with the creative enough ideas to actually account for the issue. Mm-hmm. So to give justice to God is actually to say, they have no idea what they're doing, so I'm still going to trust the scepter of justice into God's hand, because he can see mm-hmm. all of that and know the massive wave of brokenness that led to them to do it, know the massive wave of brokenness that what they did caused beyond it, and weigh it all out, figure it all out, and figure out how the cross can deal with all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there you go. I get that that's tense. And even the idea emotionally of allowing your perpetrator the out of ignorance feels so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I'm not, and that's not what my intention was on Sunday. And I'm sorry for that. If that's what you think I was trying to do, I don't think I'm giving them an out. I think that their pain, the pain that they caused you, is worse than they know mm-hmm. and worse than even you know.
So I think one of the things that I think I would want people to know pastorally is that the reason for talking about forgiveness is eventually the dream of reconciled relationships. But at this point is actually for the person doing the forgiving. Like,
yes,
qualitatively, if you can live a life forgiving, your life will be better. Like, this is like the whole like Andy Stanley idea of like it gives you a better life and it makes you better at life. Like, actually practicing forgiveness is good for you. Not easy for you, but will make a huge difference in your life. I think I told the story of my grandma who really struggled with forgiveness, and like just the physical toll holding that took upon her. Talked about myself nearly ripping the wheel off this transit van driving kids down to Tennessee, like just the toxicity, like to speak that out to God in anger and give it to him to in the end root for forgiveness for the person who's doing it. It's like a confessional moment. It takes all of the yuck out of you and it actually just gets it out.
Yeah, it detoxes you, and there still may not be reconciliation, but at least it allows the forgiver to move on with life genuinely.
Yeah, there's a famous...
Now, I think part of the reason that's true, and I 100% agree with what Alex just said, part of the reason that's true is holding the grudge and not forgiving will never be satisfying.
No.
Because of what I just said earlier, you couldn't possibly come up with a punishment big enough to make you feel satisfied.
Yeah.
Which is why, interestingly, a lot of people who in anger murder someone are not satisfied by the fact that they murdered them.
Yeah.
Like, you could kill your perpetrator and you won't be satisfied because the crime they committed is bigger than their life and your life and every life. So to hold on to it it's like it's too big for a human to stomach.
This is this legendary Max Lucado quote that has reverberated round into space forever. Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing that you are the prisoner.
Yeah.
Like it's actually primarily releases you from something.
Yeah.
Before it releases the other person from something.
Absolutely.
You become a freer soul.
And it's a prerequisite to reconciliation.
Totally.
But it has massive benefits, even if reconciliation isn't possible. Yeah. We went an hour and 12 minutes. Sorry, everyone. I love these really good questions. These questions are like deep, and thought out.
And we went an hour and 12 minutes with zero banter.
We didn't talk nonsense at all.
Other than your
suntan thing.
Suntan thing, yes.
Yeah. All right. Love y'all.
See you
Thanks
guys.
for tuning in.